The economy can feel, well, super confusing, right? Almost like it's designed to be complicated. But what if I told you it's all governed by just a handful of really simple, powerful rules? And once you get these rules, it becomes almost impossible for politicians or splashy headlines to pull one over on you. Okay, let me ask you this. Why is it that when a city tries to make rent cheaper, it often ends up creating a massive housing shortage? I mean, that sounds completely backward, doesn't it? Well, the answer is all tangled up in those hidden economic rules we just talked about. And today, we're going to untangle them together. So let's just dive right in. The whole idea here is pretty simple. Either you learn the rules of the economy or, well, you're going to get fooled. But if you master them, you'll start to see the world with this incredible new clarity. All right, first up is rule number 1. And trust me, this is a big one. It explains exactly why so many plans that sound fantastic, the ones with the best intentions, end up just completely blowing up in our faces. And to really see this in action, let's look at a fascinating real-world story, the case of Maryland's vanishing millionaires. So picture this. It's 2008. The state of Maryland is short on cash, and they come up with what they think is a pretty simple, straightforward solution. So here's exactly what went down. In 2008, they roll out this new millionaire tax, thinking it's going to bring in an extra $106 million. And hey, the first year, it works just like they planned. But then, year 2 hits, and suddenly a third of the state's millionaires, we're talking 2,000 people, had just packed up and moved out. The result? Instead of gaining that $100 million, Maryland ended up losing a staggering $257 million in tax revenue. Ouch. So what on earth happened? Well, the state's intention was obvious: raise more money. But what they actually did was create a huge reward for millionaires to leave. And that right there is the core lesson. People respond to rewards, not to good intentions. You always have to ask, what behavior are we really paying people to do? And that leads us perfectly into rule number 2. It's this. Every single choice, I don't care if it's made by a government or by you standing in a coffee shop, comes with a hidden cost. Yeah, this quote absolutely nails it. See, most of us ask the wrong question. We ask, can I afford this? The real question, the much more powerful question, is what am I giving up to get this? This is what economists call opportunity cost. And it just means that when you choose one thing, you are by definition not choosing everything else. Okay, let's make this super practical. Think about buying a car. You've got 2 options. Option A, the flashy $50,000 BMW. You get that "I've made it" feeling. Option B, the practical, super reliable $20,000 Toyota Corolla. Now, on the surface, that's just a $30,000 difference, right? Wrong. The true opportunity cost is actually closer to $250,000. $250,000. How is that possible? Simple. If you took that $30,000 difference and just stuck it in a basic investment, like an index fund, and let it sit for 30 years, well, thanks to the magic of compound interest, it could have grown to almost $250,000. All of a sudden, that BMW didn't just cost you 50 grand, it cost you a small fortune. So here's the big takeaway. Think of every dollar you spend as a vote. It's a vote for this thing right now over what that dollar could have become in the future. And once you really get that, once you start seeing these hidden trade-offs everywhere, it's like gaining a superpower for making better decisions. And not just with your money, but with your time and your energy too. Okay, so we've covered incentives and we've covered trade-offs, the things that drive our individual choices. But that brings up a huge question. How do the choices of millions, no, billions of people all coordinate so that we have a functioning economy? Well, that brings us to rule number 3, and the secret language that makes it all possible. There's this legendary story about the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. He's visiting Britain, and he asked the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, a simple question. How do you make sure people get food? And her answer was just incredible. She said, I don't. Prices do. And wow, that is such a profound idea. Because, see, prices aren't just random numbers on a tag. They're messages. They are signals that carry a ton of information about what's available and what people actually want. This constant flood of information is how a pizza gets delivered to some tiny town in the middle of nowhere, just as reliably as it does in a massive city. And it all happens without some pizza czar in an office somewhere pulling all the strings. Okay, so if prices are the communication network of the economy, what happens when we try to mess with them?
What happens when we step in and try to force an outcome that we think is more fair? Well, this brings us to rule number 4, and it's another reason why good intentions so often go wrong. Let's circle all the way back to that first question I asked you about housing shortages. The classic example is rent control. Here's how the dominoes fall. Step 1, a government puts a cap on rent. The intention is noble, right? Make housing affordable. But step 2, demand goes through the roof. Of course it does. Everyone wants a cheap apartment. Step 3, the supply of apartments just stops. I mean, why would a builder or a landlord spend money on new buildings or even basic upkeep if they can't make any money? So, step 4, buildings start to fall apart. And the final domino? You get a massive, crippling housing shortage. The very policy designed to help people ends up hurting, well, pretty much everyone. And look, this isn't a fluke. It's a completely predictable pattern. Anytime you force a price too low, what's called a price ceiling, you get a shortage. We saw it with food in Zimbabwe. And if you do the opposite and force a price too high, a price support, you get a massive wasteful surplus, like the mountains of wheat we've seen rotting in India. The harsh reality is this: when you mess with prices, you break the entire communications system of the economy. And the tragic irony is that even though these policies are almost always designed to help the poor, they're the ones who suffer the most when the supply of things they need, like food and housing, just dries up. So if trying to control things from the top down so often backfires, what's the alternative? Well, our final section here looks at a few simple, connected rules that show how the economy actually creates value and how, when it's allowed to work, it can make everyone better off. Let's talk about profit. It's probably one of the most misunderstood concepts out there. But really, profit is just a signal. It's the market screaming at you, yes, whatever you're doing, people love it. Do more of that. It's the clearest feedback you can get that you are creating something valuable. And on the flip side, a loss is an equally important signal. That's the market saying, no, please, for the love of all that is good, stop doing that. You are wasting precious resources on something people don't want. Losses are absolutely crucial. They're what stop us from wasting even more time, money, and energy on bad ideas. Okay, and this brings us to the beauty of trade. Let's make it super simple. Imagine you have a sandwich, but you're really craving pizza. Your friend has pizza, but they'd rather have a sandwich. So you trade. Now, stop and think about what just happened. No new food was made. The amount of stuff in the world is exactly the same, but you are both happier. Value was literally created out of thin air. You both won. And this is exactly why it's so wrong to think of trade between countries as some kind of war where one side has to lose. It's not a competition, it's cooperation. When we each specialize in what we're good at and then trade with each other, everyone ends up richer and with more stuff than they could have possibly made on their own. And all of this brings us to our final and maybe most important takeaway. You don't win by fixing what's broken, you win by doubling down on what's working. What economics really teaches us is to listen to the signals all around us, prices, profit, loss, and to pour our energy into the things that actually create value. And honestly, that's not just an economic lesson, that's a life lesson. So from now on, anytime you hear a politician or a pundit offer a simple solution to a big, messy problem, just stop. Pause for a second and ask yourself 2 simple questions. 1, what behavior is really being rewarded here? And 2, what's the hidden cost? What are we giving up?